Okay, so what if I told you that ancient shamans and modern physicists were actually describing the exact same reality, just using completely different languages? That is the mind-bending idea we're diving into today from the book The Quantum Warrior by Serge Angelos. And trust me, it might just change how you see, well, everything. This quote from the author, it really sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? We're not looking for simple, easy answers here. Instead, we're basically joining an intellectual detective story, investigating parallels that are so stunning you just can't write them off as a coincidence. And here it is, the big question that drives this entire exploration. What if two of the most different ways of knowing the world, you've got the experiential, intuitive path of the shaman and the mathematical, rigorous path of the physicist, what if they've somehow, against all odds, arrived at the same, incredibly bizarre map of the cosmos? So, who's the detective at the center of this whole mystery? Well, his background is actually what makes this story so compelling. See, what's so fascinating is that our guide, Serge Angelos, he isn't a mystic or an anthropologist. He's an engineer, a Swiss industrial engineer no less, a guy trained to see patterns in logical, predictable systems. But after living in Mexico for 3 decades, he started to see a pattern he just couldn't shake. So here are the puzzle pieces he found. He was reading the controversial but incredibly detailed books by Carlos Castaneda, and inside he found these descriptions of reality from Toltec shamanism that sounded hauntingly familiar. They seemed to echo and in some cases even predict some of the weirdest, most profound discoveries of 20th century quantum physics. And the question just kept nagging at him. How on earth could that be possible? Okay, so the first major clue is the stunning parallel in how both of these traditions map the very structure of reality itself. It's pretty wild. All right, first up, from the shamanic tradition, you have this concept of the tonal. Now, the tonal is basically everything that makes up our organized, everyday world. It's our language, our thoughts, the chair you're sitting on, the rules we live by. You can think of it as the small, safe island of everything we know. But, and this is the kicker, surrounding that tiny little island of the tonal is a vast, infinite ocean called the Nagual. The Nagual is everything else. It's the indescribable, the unknowable, the raw, unordered chaos of pure existence that our minds just can't wrap themselves around. But its very definition, it's beyond words. Okay, now let's flip the coin and look at physics. For them, our island of the known is the classical world. This is the reality described by good old Newton, a predictable, understandable clockwork universe. It's the world of cause and effect, where a ball falls at the same speed every time. It's comfortable. But just like the shamans, physicists in the 20th century discovered their own mysterious ocean, and it's called the quantum realm. It's this bizarre reality that lies just beneath the surface of our predictable world. The great physicist Niels Bohr famously said that if quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it. It's a world of probabilities and weirdness that just defies our common sense. And when you put them side by side like this, it's kind of hard to ignore, right? On one side, you have the tonal and the classical world, the island of the known. And on the other, the Nahual and the quantum realm, the vast, mysterious ocean. We're talking two totally different vocabularies, but are they describing the exact same territory? Now, if that first clue was startling, this next one is what the author considers the smoking gun. It's all about the moment the greatest scientific genius of the modern era was proven, well, completely wrong. So, back in 1935, you've got Albert Einstein. And he uses this phrase, spooky action at a distance, to basically mock an idea from quantum mechanics that he found totally absurd. The idea was called non-locality, the theory that two particles could be linked or entangled and affect each other instantly no matter how far apart they were. For Einstein, who proved nothing could travel faster than light, this was just impossible, voodoo. But then, history had a huge surprise in store. In 1982, a series of brilliant experiments by a physicist named Elaine Aspect proved Einstein wrong. The spooky action was real. And then, in 2022, it became official. Aspect and his colleagues won the Nobel Prize in physics, and the committee's announcement basically said, yep, nature is non-local. The universe is, in fact, spooky. And here's the punchline. Science spent nearly 50 years proving something that shamanic traditions had described all along through what they called impossible journeys and instantaneous connections. on one of the absolute weirdest features of reality, the so-called superstition turned out to be right. Which brings us right back to this powerful idea. You have to ask yourself, are we looking at two completely different paths of exploration? One using math and giant machines, the other using trained consciousness, that have somehow, against all odds, ended up in the same strange place, describing the same fundamental truth about our universe? Okay, so we've laid out the evidence, the parallels are on the table. Now for the million-dollar question, what on earth does it all mean? So let's just ask it straight up. Are we just dealing with a massive, mind-boggling coincidence here, or maybe a trick of the human mind? Or is it something way, way more profound? The book lays out three main possibilities. First, could it just be a coincidence? Universal metaphors that any deep philosophy would eventually stumble upon. It's the simplest explanation, but does it really account for how specific these parallels are? Second, maybe it's psychology. Deep, universal archetypes hardwired into the human brain, like Carl Jung talked about. That's pretty compelling, but does it risk reducing these profound insights to just mental projections? Or, and this is the third, most radical idea, could shamanism have been a lost technology? A technology of consciousness, a rigorous, repeatable way to directly perceive the fundamental nature of reality. So where does all this leave us? Well, the point of this whole exploration isn't to give you a neat little answer. It's actually something much more important. The author is really clear about this. He doesn't claim to have solved the mystery. This book isn't a declaration of, I have the truth. It's a presentation of evidence. He's simply arguing that the patterns are too specific and too profound to just be brushed aside and ignored. So what's the big takeaway for us? Look, the point isn't that ancient shamans were scribbling down quantum field equations in the dirt. The real point is to challenge our own certainty, to ask ourselves if the scientific method, as powerful and amazing as it is, really holds a complete monopoly on truth. It's an invitation to cultivate what Zen Buddhists call a beginner's mind, an openness to the possibility that the universe is far, far stranger than any of our current models can contain. And so we end with the most haunting question of all. It's a question that really sticks with you long after you finish listening. If these ancient traditions really did possess a genuine way of perceiving reality, then we have to ask, what did they know that we forgot?